Hey, shalom, peace and blessings, and welcome to the family. Welcome to another edition of Maccabeestv. It's your brother, Priest Dan, Lines of Israel, Maccabees Alliance Council. You brothers and sisters see the title of the video. The name of the video is called Unwrapping the Pharaohs. And I named this video after this particular book. And I'm going to tell you, brothers and sisters, the purpose of me actually even filming this. And I'm doing it with my phone for a reason. So last week, I got a text from two brothers, maybe like 2 hours apart, asking me the same question concerning Egypt. Now, you brothers and sisters might ask yourself, well, we believe in the Bible. Why is Egypt important? Well, the reason why Egypt is important is because when you read the Bible, you see that the Israelites and the Egyptians, they had a lot of interactions throughout the Bible, throughout biblical history, throughout the biblical narrative, right? And so brothers were asking me a particular question, and they were asking me about something that I said in a lecture that I did a few years ago, and they were asking me, where did I get it, right? Now, there's a lot of sources that I draw from. What I like to do, and the reason why I'm going to recommend this book is for several reasons, right? This particular book is very, very basic. It's elementary. The reason why I like this book is because it doesn't necessarily just deal with Egypt itself, because that's not a subject that Israelites want to study, but it deals with Israelites and Egypt's connection throughout biblical times. It gives you the narrative of what was going on in the Bible and what was going on in Egypt at the same time, so you can do what they call a chronological or historical synchronism. All right? So now, there was a video that came out last week, and I believe this is the reason why these brothers asked me the question. Now, I don't know, and these brothers are in the same camp, so I was wondering, were they having a conversation with each other and they both text me and didn't tell each other, or what it was? But anyway, there was a video last week where, of course, someone in the Kemetic community was asked if the people in the Bible were real, and the answer was no. And the standard that they used was that the reason why the Bible is not real is because nobody ever found the bodies. Nobody's ever found the bodies of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David, Solomon, etc., etc. So since the bodies have not been recovered and they're not in museums, therefore the Bible is not real. Now, instead of sitting back and having an argument with them, how I like to do things when I have that discussion is I ask them to stand on that. So is the standard that in order for somebody to actually be a real person, you have to have a physical body? Is that the standard? And 9 times out of 10, they'll say, yep. We have all the bodies all the mummies of Egypt and museums, etc., etc. That's what they tell you. That's what they tell you. Brothers and sisters, I'm here to tell you that that's a lie. That is a lie. See, there were approximately 170 pharaohs of Egypt, and they have recovered less than 50. And I'm going to show y'all that. Less than 50. So, if the standard is, and they set the standard, not us, that in order for somebody to have actually existed, you have to have a body, that doesn't just go for the Bible, that should go for all history, including ancient Egypt. So the question was, hey, Danyaahla, I heard you say before that they didn't find the mummies of a lot of the ancient Egyptian pharaohs. Where'd you get that? Well, this is a good place to start. This is a good place to start. One of the reasons why I like this book mainly is because a lot of the illustrations, it's a very easy read. It's not like 400 or 500 pages like some books. And the illustrations in the book are very, very good. So I recommended this book to the brothers, and I'm going to do a review of this book and some of the great points in the book that I uncovered on a separate video. But for this particular video, I'm going to answer the question about if they haven't found the bodies of the apostles or the prophets, were they real people? If that's the standard, then I have some questions that I want to ask, right? By the way, just so you brothers and sisters know, when Nasi Yashuvel debated Sarah, Sut, and Seti, this is one of the main go-to books that he used as well. All right. So let's go ahead and come to this book. And by the way, I'm sitting here and I'm working on a PowerPoint, actually. That's what I'm doing. You know what I'm saying? I'm sitting here working on the PowerPoint. Y'all will get that soon. You know, nowadays I'm hearing that there's some type of shame in being in this truth a long time. And there's some type of shame in knowing a lot about history and knowing a lot about your culture. There's some type of shame attached to that all of a sudden. All of a sudden, it's shameful. Crazy. This is a crazy world we're living in, brothers and sisters. Let's go to I'm gonna come right here to, this is page Let's see, what page is that? This is page 11 of the book Unwrapping the Pharaohs, and I'm going to come to the third paragraph right here. And this is what it says. It says, the kings of the first and second dynasties were buried in monuments for which the Arabic name is mastaba, meaning bench. They were buildings made of sun-dried mud bricks which were partially or wholly buried. However, in many cases, their tops protruded above the desert, and the Arabs came to call them mastabas. It is curious that these kings had mastabas at Saqqara, some 19 miles south of modern Cairo, and also Abydos, 311 miles farther south. However, the bodies of these kings have what? Have not been found in either place. It is still not known where they're buried. So, according to the scholars, and of course I cross-referenced this with a whole bunch of other websites, they have never found the bodies of the pharaohs of the first and second dynasty. So if you're going to tell me that because the Israelites don't have bodies in museums, which we had a different burial practice than the Egyptians, we didn't mummify. If you're going to tell me that because we don't have bodies, that is your proof that they didn't exist, then you got to have that same energy, as they say nowadays. You got to have that same standard and say, brother, they have not found the kings of the first and second dynasties of Egypt, so they didn't exist. And all of a sudden, you're going to get, oh, well, it's different. It's different. That's what they say. It's different, but it's not different. It's the same thing. You set the standard, not us. They've never recovered these bodies. A lot of times, all we know about these pharaohs is the cartouches that's on the king's list. That's all we know. A lot of times, we don't know anything more outside of that. So therefore, they didn't exist. They didn't exist. Simple as that. They got to keep the same energy. But that's not all, right? That's not all. By the way, just so you brothers and sisters know, in the first and second dynasties of Egypt, they didn't bury them in pyramids, as you see, and also they didn't mummify either. That's why those bodies were never found and never preserved, because they didn't start mummification in the very first two dynasties of Egypt. They weren't doing that. That's the point. That's the point. The Egyptians didn't have a practice of mummifying in the very earliest dynasties, so that's why you can't find the bodies. Well, guess what? The Israelites never had a practice of mummifying. That's why you can't find the bodies. But that's not all. That's not all. Let's go to the next one, right? Now, let's move this out the way. Now we are on page, what page is this? This is page 69. This is page 69 because this is page 68. So this is page 69, right? And we're going to go to page 69 and we're going to go to this highlighted paragraph right here. It says, some scholars have questioned the existence of some of these dynasties, right? Why? Because a lot of the dynasties were ruling at the same time in Egypt. And what they did was when they made the king's list, they made it seem like each of these pharaohs were ruling by themselves independently, one by one. But no, a lot of those dynasties were simultaneous. But that's not for today's lesson. Let's continue. At least as independent rulers. Scholars refer to this era as the first intermediate period. However, Corville suggests that it should be identified with the second intermediate period, dynasties 14 to 16. Here we go. The problem is that only one tomb has been found for the pharaohs of this period. So from the 14th to the 16th dynasty, they only found one tomb. That's all they found. I heard Sonetta say last week, or week before last, that you got all the mummies of the Egyptian pharaohs in the museum. That's a lie. That is a lie. They've not found a lot of the bodies. That's a lie. You talking about updating information? You got to update your information, bro. Anyway, let's continue. The problem is that only one tomb has been found for the pharaohs of this period, and we are very much in the dark about what really happened. We're very much in the dark about what really happened. A lot of, like I said before, a lot of the information concerning these pharaohs during this period, nobody knows. Nobody knows. Outside of their names being on king's lists and cartouches, nobody knows. So when these dudes talk to you about how they know all this great history about ancient Egypt, a lot of information, they're lying. And they're banking on the fact that you don't or we don't know either, but we study. Nowadays, studying is a shame, apparently, but we study anyway. But if these dynasties did not exist independently, the dates of the earlier dynasties would have to be reduced. So like I said, brothers and sisters, I just really went into this. This is actually not a bad book, man. It's not actually a bad book. It's a great place to start. Of course, as always, I would encourage brothers and sisters that if you get this book, and it's pretty cheap on Amazon, that you cross-reference the information in this book with more scholarly sources, obviously. But these authors are pretty much on point. And so for the brothers that had asked me about this is one of the sources that I use to show and prove that they can't use that argument against us about not having bodies, because they have the same problem in Egypt, the same exact problem. And I'm going to actually, on my other channel, Lions of Israel Library, I'm actually going to go through this book more in depth to show you a lot more stuff. There's a lot of great stuff in this book. Now, I will say one thing. About this book. This book goes into the argument, and this is one of the places, like I said, everything in this book is not for everybody. This book goes into the argument about whether or not Ramses was the Pharaoh of the Exodus, right? These authors pretty much say he was not, and I tend to agree with them. And then you might ask me, well, Danyaahla, why? I've gone over it before. The Myrna Patah Stele is one reason why I don't think that Ramses was the Pharaoh of the Exodus. Also, the dating of Jericho is another reason why I don't believe Ramses was the Pharaoh of the Exodus. And a litany of other reasons. And also basically just understanding how the Bible was translated and how at different time periods there were anachronisms as the scribal families were making copies of our records. They were putting anachronisms into the Bible, meaning they were naming places after the names of their times and not necessarily after the names that they were called in ancient times. So when you read about Ramses and Pithom in Genesis, that was written later by scribal families later, but those lands were not called that at the time the Israelites were in the land of Egypt. But that's neither for here nor there. I've gone over this at different Passovers. I've done this before. But anyway, I just wanted to show this book. This is a pretty good book, man. And if you want to continue to learn a lot of the history of the Bible, because the Bible is a history book. It's not a religious book. It's a history book. It's our culture, it's our mores, our folkways, etc. Then we need to treat it as such and stop treating it like a religious book. We need to get into the history and understand what it is that we're reading, understand time periods. When you're reading about the prophets, when you go into prophets like Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, Obadiah, what time periods were they living in? What was their audience? Who was they talking to? What was the purpose of the Most High sending them to Israel? Not all the prophets went to all Israel. Some prophets went to the northern kingdom. Some prophets went to the southern kingdom, etc., etc. We got to get back into our records and learn. And so, like I said, if you're interested in those sort of things, I have the channel Lions of Israel Library. I'm going to start loading a lot more videos. I used to do book reviews years ago. I'm definitely going to get back into it because there's a lot of brothers and sisters that want information, that want to actually know what it is that we're teaching and have the sources behind it. And I say all praise to brothers and sisters that have that mindset. I'm going to do my best to make sure I help you in that endeavor. With that being said, it's your brother Priest Dan, Lions of Israel, Maccabees Lions Council. You can catch me on the next joint, and the link to the other channel will be in the comment section. Shalom.